Thank you. Hi there. Hi, Bobby. Love you. So it's Burt Metz opening up the baseball season. But I got a correction. I got a phone call yesterday from the president of the PGA. He said that he had a correction. She said that there was a correction. I said the flag had to be removed from the hole when someone was putting. They changed the rules this year, a new rule. The flag can be remain in the hole, so you can putt with the flag. Supposedly, that's to speed up the game. So I learned something new. But so much for golf. Today is baseball. I had my hot dog and my beer, and I'm ready to go. It was very exciting when I was a kid watching baseball at Ebbets Field. It was a real adventure. They had a number of fans who were permanent fixtures at the game. They had a band, a makeshift group of guys, a ragabond bunch of guys called the Dodger Symphony, not symphony, but symphony. And they played some pretty bad music. But what they would do is when the visiting player made out, they would march him back to his seat, you know, dump da dum, and they'd keep time to his step. And when he sat down, they would clash the cymbals. And it got to be a game because some of the visiting players would fake sitting down, try to get them to clash the cymbals, and they would wait until he sat down, and then they would hit the cymbals, and the crowd would applaud. So that was the Dodger Symphony. They also had a guy behind third base. The Dodger Symphony was always behind first base. They had a guy named Eddie who used to bring signs to the game, and he had a shrill voice. You could hear him a mile away. The Dodgers had a third baseman, Cookie Lavagetto, and Eddie would with a shrill voice, would call out, "Cookie, Cookie," and the crowd loved it. And then years later, Pee Wee Reese came to the Dodgers, and Pee Wee wasn't a kid. He was 21 or 22, but he had a baby face. And Eddie would call out, "Pee Wee, did you have your milk yet? Come and get your milk." And Reese loved it. Reese laughed and had a good time, and so did the crowd. And the most familiar person of the fans was Hilda Chester. She sat up in the bleachers with her cowbell, and everybody knew Hilda. She kept ringing that cowbell. And it was a real adventure coming to the ball game. We loved it. I wanted to show you what baseball looked like in 1916. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this on TV, but everyone in the stands was a man. There were no women at the ballpark. Every man was wearing a suit and tie and a hat. In fact, they all had the same hats. It was a white hat with a black band around it. 1916. And baseball has changed a little bit since then. Today marks the first day of the season. The Yankees are opening against the world champion Washington Nationals. The first pitch is being thrown out by Dr. Tony Fauci, and that's interesting too. That's a story in itself. And tomorrow the Mets open up. I think game time is 4:00. So I thought I'd throw out the first pitch today with my favorite poem of all time, Casey at the Bat. So here is Casey. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day, for the score stood 4-2 with just one inning left to play. And so when Cooney died at first and Burroughs did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game. A straggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to the hope that springs eternal within the human breast. They thought if only Casey could get a better whack at that, they'd put up even money now with Casey at the bat. But Flynn preceded Casey, as did also Jimmy Blake. And the former was a pudding and the latter was a fake. And so upon that sickened multitude, grim melancholy sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat. But Flynn let drive a single to the wonderment of all. And Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had settled and they saw what had occurred, there was Jimmy safe at second and Flynn a hugging third. From upon that gladdened multitude went up a joyous yell. It bounded from the mountaintop and rattled in the dell. It struck upon the hillside and recoiled upon the flat. For Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat. There was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearing and a smile on Casey's face. And when responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his cap, no stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he wiped his hands in dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded while he wiped them on his shirt. And while the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed from Casey's eyes. A sneer curled Casey's lip. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air. And Casey stood a-watching it in haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded sped. "'Tain't my style," said Casey. "Strike one," the umpire said. From the bleachers black with people went up a muffled roar like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. "Kill him! Kill the umpire!" shouted someone from the stands. And it's likely they'd have done that had not Casey raised his hand. With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He motioned to the pitcher, and once more the spheroid flew. But Casey still ignored it. And the umpire said, "Strike two." "Fraud," cried the maddened crowd. And the echo answered, "Fraud." But one scornful look from Casey, and the audience was awed. They saw his face grow cold and stern. They saw his muscles strain, and they knew that Casey would not let that ball go by again. The smile is gone from Casey's face. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence the bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go, and now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. Oh, somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. And bands are playing somewhere. And somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing. And somewhere children shout. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out. Thank you. Poor Casey. Now for baseball trivia. All our questions are about baseball. And these questions were supplied to me by Gretchen, who does the brain teasers, or used to do brain teasers every Wednesday. Now she just sends material up to us. Okay, first question. What material was first used to cover a baseball in 1975? And did you know that was cowhide? That's why they used to call the baseball a cowhide. Next question. What two cities have the oldest stadiums in Major League Baseball? Actually, baseball parks started in 1871. Baseball was invented by Abner Doubleday, who was an officer in the Union Army. And the first ballpark was South End Grounds in Boston in 1871, home of the Boston Braves and the Red Stockings, as they were called, the Red Stockings. And a lot of ballparks opened in 1871, 1874. And the Polo Grounds opened in New York in 1883, and the Polo Grounds was open until 1888. And that was the first Polo Grounds. It was rebuilt after 1888. And the new Polo Grounds was built in 1889, and it was used until 1990. No, that 1990, yeah. That Polo Grounds was the home to the Giants and the Yankees. Yes, the Yankees played there before the Yankee Stadium was built. And the Mets also played in the Polo Grounds. And that's why it was used until 1990. No, that can't be right. Can't read my writing. Maybe it's 1960. I don't know. I'll have to check it. Oh, no, here it is, 1963. Polo Grounds was used until 1963 by the Mets. Okay, next question. Who was the last American League baseballer to win the Triple Crown in 1967? And as a hint, his last name starts with a Y. And that was Carl Yastrzemski, Boston Red Sox. One of the great hitters of all time. Next question. What Major League Baseball team has its fans dubbed cheeseheads? And if you know, cheese comes from Wisconsin. That has to be the Milwaukee Brewers. Teams had a lot of interesting names. Of course, the Dodgers were called the Beloved Bums. And the Yankees were the Bronx Bombers. The Cardinals back in the day were called the Gas House Gang. And the Cincinnati Reds were known as the Big Red Machine. Interesting names of teams. What's the most home runs by one player in a single major league game? And one player hit 4 home runs, and I believe that was Joe Adcock, who was at that time playing with the Milwaukee Braves. That was the Boston Braves when they moved to Milwaukee. 4 home runs in one game. A lot of players have hit 3. Next question. What did Babe Ruth, Roger Hornsby, Ted Williams, and Willie Mays all do in their first major league at-bat? And if you guessed it, you're right. They struck out. They all struck out their first at-bat. But they didn't strike out too many times after that. Next question. What governor was on hand at home plate to greet Hank Aaron when he broke Babe Ruth's home run record? And if you know that Hank Aaron played for the Atlanta Braves, you can pretty much guess the governor of Georgia was Jimmy Carter, who, of course, went on to be president. Here's an interesting question. Against what opposing team did Babe Ruth hit his first career home run? And the answer is the New York Yankees. Remember, Ruth came up with the Boston Red Sox. Actually, he was a pitcher with the Red Sox and a very good pitcher. 20-game winner. And so his first home run was against the Yankees. When the Yankees got a hold of him, they didn't want him to play every 4th day, so they made him into an outfielder so he could play every day. Who was the first major league player to pitch a ball over 100 miles an hour? And that's an interesting question because it's only in the last 30 years that they've been recording the speed of a baseball. The answer to the question is Nolan Ryan, but I have a hunch there were a few pitchers that threw as fast, but they didn't know how to time it. They didn't have the machine to time it. What Baltimore Orioles manager was ejected from a record 91 games? 91 games in his lifetime. And that was Earl Weaver, great manager of the Orioles. Who was the first major league player to have his number retired? I'll give you a hint. His number was number 4. And that was the Iron Horse, Lou Gehrig. Since then, a lot of teams have retired a lot of numbers. The Yankees retired Ruth's number 3, Gehrig's number 4, DiMaggio's number 5, and a host of others. The only number I know that was permanently retired from every team was number 42, and that was Jackie Robinson's number. But there's one game in April where every player on every team in both leagues wear number 42 in honor of Jackie Robinson. That was after his he made his first appearance in the major leagues in April. Next question. What player hit 70 home runs in 1998? And the hint here is his initials are MM, but that's here to confuse you because it wasn't Mickey Mantle. And that was Mark McGwire. Who beat out Ted Williams for the American League Most Valuable Player Award in 1941 when Williams hit for an average of 406? That was the last time any player hit over 400. Ted Williams hit 406 in 1941 and did not win the MVP, Most Valuable Player Award. That award was given to the Yankee Clipper, Joe DiMaggio. What New York Met hit the ball that rolled between Bill Buckner's legs in the 1986 World Series that won the 6th game for the Mets? And that was Mookie Wilson. Bill Buckner was playing on a bad leg, but I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it. The ball did not come up. It did not bounce up. It just went right under his glove. And the winning run came in. And that was a very exciting game because the Mets were losing by 2 runs with 2 out in the 9th when they got 4 successive hits. And then Mookie hit that ground ball that won the game. What baseball player was nicknamed Charlie Hustle? And Charlie Hustle was Pete Rose, who did not make it into the Hall of Fame, although he's got more hits than any other player. He didn't make it into the Hall of Fame because he was betting on baseball games. Never bet against his team, but when he was a manager, he bet on his team, and that's kept him out of the Hall of Fame. What player holds the record for stealing home the most? Stealing home plate. The hint here is his initials are TC. And that goes back to the 1920s. And that's Ty Cobb, who is a fantastic all-around player. In Major League Baseball, how far are first base and second base? How far apart are they? Actually, it's the same for third base and home plate. All the bases are the same distance. They're 90 feet apart. And if you watch a game, it seems like they run from one base to another very quickly. But if you've ever run those bases, you know they're 90 feet is a considerable distance. It's not that close. Looks a lot closer on television. What number did Willie Mays wear for the New York Giants? And that was number 24. In those days, the player wore the same number pretty much all the time because the players stayed on one team all the time. Today, players can play for 5, 6, 7 different teams, and they have to wear different numbers. But some players are remembered for the number they wore. Like Joe D wore number 5. The Bambino Babe Ruth wore number 3. Pee Wee Reese wore number 1. Robinson, 42. Campanella, 39. And Willie Mays wore number 24. Next question. How many home runs did Hank Aaron hit in his whole career? And the answer is 755. And the last question is an interesting question today. How many games are there in a Major League Baseball season? The answer is 162, but not this year. This year, it's going to be 60 games, and that's it. Less than 1/3 of a season. A number of years ago, baseball used to be 156 games. And when Roger Maris broke Ruth's record of 60 home runs, he hit 61. They had to put an asterisk next to it because Ruth only played in 156 games and Maris played in 162. But this year, there are only going to be 60 games. Starting this afternoon with the Yankees, and the Mets start tomorrow. Enjoy the games and play ball. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Gretchen. I like it too.